How's it going? My name is Darren, and today I want to talk a bit about BFA, mostly about Outlaw rogues, and I guess the RNG that will probably get addressed once BFA comes out going forward into the next expansion. RNG. Look, we can all agree that nobody likes RNG. From legendaries to gear to playing some of the classes with RNG mechanics, that's not always fun. Some people just want predictability. You get none of that when playing Outlaw Rogue. And Outlaw Rogue is a gambling type of specialization. When you're trying to figure out which buffs you want, whether you should reroll, whether you shouldn't reroll, maybe you should roll with 4 comm points or 5, it's a lot of judgment calls. A lot of judgment calls that you would make, let's say, if you were trying to gamble, and it takes with statistics. Yeah, statistics are basically simple. You have a 1 in 5 chance, or 20% chance, to gain 2 or more buffs on your rolls. But with that being said, there's a lot more that goes into the depth of the specialization. So basically you need to have experience in order to be able to judge calls, but in order to be able to judge calls, you first need to have experience with the specialization, kind of creating a catch-22 system that turns a lot of people in the rogue community off. And on top of it, Outlaw Rogue is even stronger the more buffs you added. In previous patches we had a 1 buff, 2 buff, 3 buff, 6 buff combo, and if you got a 3 buff you were doing more damage than a 2 buff. If you had a 2 buff you were doing more damage than a 1 buff, and if you had a 6 buff you were basically in god mode. In current patches you can have a 1 buff, 2 buff, or 5 buff combo. 1 buff you're doing moderate, 2 buff you're doing somewhat almost average, and a 5 buff you're kind of just blowing everybody out of the water. To give an example of how strong 5 buff is, it's almost equivalent to bursting with 1 buff equals to the damage of a 5 buff combo if you get in right procs and you're critting a lot. And I mean, the damage is insane to be able to do that much without cooldowns, and imagine that with cooldowns. You can break some records. And if you take a look at the specialization with the Antorus 4-piece bonus, we actually get to test this. If you have, let's say, 2 buffs and you're using run through in order to get us an extra buff, let's say you have Shark-Infested Waters and Buried Treasure. 2 fairly decent buffs, you would get a decent damage output, but throw in Grand Melee. While Grand Melee isn't good on its own, those 3 buffs at the same time for 10 seconds, that's a lot of damage. What if you maybe throw in a Jolly Roger? That's a lot of damage too. Throw in the Broadsides, you get more Saber Slashes, more run-throughs, and what if you have Crit, Energy, Combo Points, and Jolly Roger? I mean, you can do that with a 4-piece buff if you are lucky. It turns out that the 4-piece buff is actually super viable for Outlaw Rogues and almost necessary. And while other classes, like let's say a Mage, when they do a Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance combo, it's a very basic combo for very basic damage, but their 2-piece and 4-piece makes that combo a little bit stronger, and that's just only a part of the specialization. For an Outlaw Rogue, it basically changes our whole playstyle and buffs us internally, because the whole spec literally revolves around the buff mechanic. So a lot of people are going to the forums and asking, how do we fix that? How do we make the spec that is so buff reliant less so? And some people point to Slice and Dice as a viable solution. Slice and Dice is an easier buff mechanic to handle, and some players are saying it needs to be stronger, if not completely equal, to Roll the Bones in terms of damage output. But when you take a look at it, a skilled rogue, skilled enough to use Roll the Bones, doing more damage than Slice and Dice, is an example of what Blizzard basically would call a get good type of deal. I understand why they don't want to make Slice and Dice better than Roll the Bones, because if you are better at making your calls, if you are better geared, if you are more experienced, and maybe I guess in some cases better as a player, that you do more damage because you are more geared, because you have more experience, it's a confusing place to be in, and it's hard for me to be on a fence on this one. They basically made a mechanic of RNG that in a way separates great Outlaw Rogues from not that great Outlaw Rogues. So then it's a question of, is there actually a problem with Outlaw? Because a lot of people do agree, if you're a better player, you're more experienced, you're better geared, you should do more damage than other players that are less experienced, less geared, and less good at the specials. I can't even talk. If anything, whether we're trying to figure out who's a better rogue, who's not a better rogue, we can all agree, a lot of people view Outlaw Rogue as the fun spec. Yeah, some of us might have preferences to Assassination. We just love dots, we love Vendetta, we love the poison playstyle, maybe even the lore behind it. We just love slamming a poison bomb in our enemy's feet, just watching so many big crit numbers happening all over the place. Or some will simply prefer Subtlety, the bursty DFA playstyle, the massive numbers all of us want to see. But a lot of people still would agree that Outlaw Rogue, let's say in PvP and PvE, is just the fun specialization. Not always the good, but irregularly the fun. A lot of people do find the idea of Roll the Bones RNG in terms of the change of your playstyle, which is slight changes, but they do change depending on your buffs, is a fun mechanic. To be able to roll the bones and adjust your playstyle slightly depending on what buffs you have is fun. It keeps the rotation from being the same. You're not always just going to be hit, alright, let's hit 1, let's hit 3, let's hit 2, let's have 4, then back 1 to 3 to 2 and 4, or 1, 2, 3, you know, whatever. You are changing your playstyle slightly. You're throwing in more abilities, or you're throwing in less abilities. You are more passive or more active, more spammy or more precise and waiting. You're sometimes trying to build combo points up until the max, or you're trying to spend them as often as you can, and you have more of a hyperactive playstyle. A lot of people do agree. The change in playstyle is what a lot of people like about Roll the Bones and Outlaw Rogue. What not everyone agrees on is whether Roll the Bones is a good mechanic and whether it should really hold that much weight to the damage that it pulls. I guess it's a question of, should the specialization be more catering to a new player, or maybe even a casual player, one that simply wants to play a pirate spec and have compelling numbers, maybe equaling to Subtlety without really having to put the strain of RNG? Or should the spec continue to have a pretty high bar for entry, almost creating like a special cult following for a specialization that literally plays and lives in the RNG? The one that makes shots almost like a poker player at a poker game, while adjusting their playstyle as the buffs provide. Kind of believing in the heart of the buffs, I guess, in a way. I think there's a fair middle ground that can be found with Roll the Bones and Outlaw Rogue. In a way, I thought about the niceties of change of playstyle. I think at its core, that is something that I like about Outlaw, and a lot of people can agree. I personally do not have a problem with RNG. I play with it and I like it. I find it fun. Let's say even if I don't do the highest damage all the time, my damage varies. Sometimes in a fight I'll have insane numbers, and there'll be days where it's a rainy day and my DPS is a little bit lower than usual. And honestly, that doesn't bother me. In a game where you're trying to look for the highest possible number, yeah, this is probably where you might not be the happiest person. You might not enjoy the fluctuations, you know, the sway, the come and go. I just kind of like to go with the motion of the ocean on this one. Whenever I play Outlaw Rogue, I'm okay if my damage suffers for a bit, because eventually it'll come back. It's almost like developing a zen. So honestly, for me, I enjoy the playstyle. I like it with its good parts and the bad parts, and I don't even think of the bad parts of like lower DPS sometimes as a negative of an Outlaw Rogue, but rather a feature in a way. So I honestly would be fine if they stayed with Outlaw Rogue. If in anything in the future, I would be okay if they maybe standardize the buffs to make him, you know, not one buff is a bad buff, or maybe if we had less buffs. But I do hope we keep the feature of, hey, your playstyle changes slightly depending on what buffs you have. I also think it's kind of prestigious to have a specialization that has like that kind of a high barrier to entry. A lot of people that play Outlaw Rogue on regular know it's a good spec, they know the potential of the spec, they know how to play it properly, they understand about the sways of the buffs, and they like it. And because we have a specific group of people that enjoys that, not everybody enjoyed it. It's almost like a secret club, it's a special club that all other Outlaw Rogues can enjoy and revel in. So I think I like the prestigiousness of that. And it's almost like it might not be a question of whether you're good as a player, but it is a question of whether you're good at Outlaw Rogue. And I think a lot of people can definitely appreciate that, to be good at something that no one else is, or not everybody is. Anyway, I just wanted to put my thoughts on BFA. TLDR, I would be fine if they made it so it's all about change of playstyle. It would be okay if they were to standardize the buffs a little bit. I don't want sliciness to become a main thing. It can be an option, and I think with some gear it should be a viable option, but I don't think it should be the main way to play the spec, because I think it'd be too boring. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Just wanted to give a bit of my thoughts on RNG for Outlaw Rogue, because I finally got my 4-piece buff for my Taurus, and it's fucking amazing in terms of what I do with playstyle. But again, it does seem more apparent, like the more buffs I have, the more damage I do. Hopefully I didn't frame this video too depressing or too negative for you guys. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. Likes allow my channel to grow and reach more people. If you enjoyed the videos of BFA, Rogue stuff, and 50511 duels, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you want to catch the live streams, which we do every single day except for Thursday, today should be a 505-1v1 US Alliance no Rogue no Monk duels, which is kind of a mouthful to say. So if you want to catch those and future streams, be sure to hit the bell next to the subscribe button in order to get the notification for yourselves. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.